What if the weapon that could quietly reshape the entire balance of the Middle East has already left its launcher, and the people sitting in Tehran do not even know it yet? Somewhere over dark water tonight, a countdown is running that almost nobody on the shore will ever hear, and by the time they do, it will already be too late to stop. Before you go any further, hit that like button right now. Not for me. Do it so your future self, 3 minutes from now, remembers exactly where to find this video again. Subscribe, because what you're about to see is only the first move in a much longer story. And share this with someone who still believes that distance alone can protect a country from a strike that never needed permission to begin. For years, Iran has been building something inside the mountains that the rest of the world was never fully meant to see. Deep tunnels cut into rock, concrete poured into halls buried so far underground that ordinary bombs would only leave a scorch mark and a shallow wound. Centrifuge halls hidden behind meters of earth and steel designed to survive anything. Short of a direct and precisely aimed penetration, the work is not secret exactly. Satellites have shown the shapes. Analysts have mapped the entrances. But knowing a thing exists and being able to stop it are two completely different battles, and the gap between them is where the danger lives. The real question that keeps intelligence officers awake at night is not whether Iran wants a nuclear weapon. It is how close they already are, how much time remains before the next milestone, and what happens if that time runs out before anyone decides to act with real force. That is the trap, and it is much tighter than it looks from the outside. Strike too late, and Iran walks through the door with a weapon in hand, and every calculation about borders, alliances, and influence shifts overnight. Strike too early or too loudly, and you hand Iran the exact excuse it has been waiting for to drag the entire region into a fight that spills far past its borders, pulleys and enemies into a chaos that nobody can control once it begins. So whatever move comes, it has to be fast. It has to be precise. So whatever move comes, it has to be fast. It has to be precise. And it has to be almost impossible to see coming until it is already too late to stop. That is the story of one of those moves. A single naval strike built to hit one of Iran's most sensitive nuclear construction sites before it can ever finish. Not a full invasion, not a declared war with speeches and flags, just a handful of missiles launched from a ship most people will never know the name of, aimed at a target most people will never see a clear photo of. And on the other side, an air defense network that Iran spent billions building, launched from a ship most people will never know the name of, aimed at a target most people will never see a clear photo of. And on the other side, an air defense network that Iran spent billions building for exactly this moment, waiting to see if all that metal and software actually works when it is truly tested. Picture the ship first, nothing dramatic to look at. Gray, low in the water, moving through crowded shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf like she belongs there. Because to anyone watching from shore, she does. Oil tankers sit at anchor all around her, waiting their turn through the narrow strait. Small fishing boats drift between them with no fixed schedule, no running lights worth noticing, and no reason to attract attention. In that kind of traffic, one more ship is invisible. Oil tankers sit at anchor all around her, waiting their turn through the narrow strait. Small fishing boats drift between them with no fixed schedule, no running lights worth noticing, and no reason to attract attention. In that kind of traffic, one more ship is invisible. That is not a mistake. That is the entire strategy. She is not hiding by disappearing into fog or darkness. She is hiding by looking exactly like everything else on the water, blending into the routine until the routine itself becomes her cover. Inside her halls sit a small number of long-range cruise missiles, each one already assigned to a target at a construction site Iran has been quietly expanding for months. If Iranian radar operators catch even a flicker of what she really is before those missiles fire, already assigned to a target at a construction site, Iran has been quietly expanding for months. If Iranian radar operators catch even a flicker of what she really is before those missiles fire, the whole plan collapses. So for hours, she runs with her most powerful sensors turned down low, almost blind by choice, trading awareness for silence. She knows that Iran does not need to physically see her to find her. It only needs one loud radio call, one active radar sweep, one careless signal that says she is something more than a tanker's shadow, and in that moment, the picture changes completely. Silence is her only real weapon right now. Every minute she spends creeping through that anchorage, a small team back on land, thousands of miles away, is watching her position update on a screen with cold precision. They planned this route weeks ago, mapping out every known Iranian radar station along the coastline like a spider's web drawn in red on a dark map. Her whole job tonight is to slide through the gaps in that web without ever touching a single strand. When there is no way around a gap, she slips into the middle of the crowd instead, one more shape among dozens of other shapes, indistinguishable from 100 miles away. She is not just wandering, though. She's aiming for one specific patch of open water. A box on the map, chosen months earlier by planners who ran the numbers over and over until they found the one location where every missile she carries could be launched at once. Each missile will follow its own separate path to its own separate target, but all of them will start from this exact same spot. She has only a few minutes to reach it and hold position. Any earlier or later, and the entire timing of the strike falls apart before it even begins. She reaches the point almost exactly on schedule. The engines pull back. She slows to a crawl, circling gently, looking for all the world. To reach it and hold position. Any earlier or later, and the entire timing of the strike falls apart before it even begins. She reaches the point almost exactly on schedule. The engines pull back. She slows to a crawl, circling gently, looking for all the world. Like a boarded patrol boat with nowhere urgent to be, a vessel that has missed the tide and is simply waiting for daylight. Then the deck opens. One by one, the missiles climb out. A short burst of fire, a deep roar that reaches your chest before it reaches your ears, wings snapping open midair with mechanical precision, and then each one drops low toward the water and disappears into the dark. It takes only a couple of minutes for all of them to leave. The smoke is gone quickly in the open air. By the time the last one clears the deck, the crew below is already thinking about breakfast and the long return journey. For them, in that moment, the hardest part of the night is already over. It is not, though, not even close. Those bright launch flames just told every radar station and every listening post on the Iranian coast exactly where this ship was standing a few seconds ago. An hour of careful, silent movement spent in 2 minutes of fire. She is now sitting closer to shore than any captain wants to be, well within range of coastal weapons built specifically to punish exactly this kind of mistake. So she turns hard for open water and pushes her engines as far as they will go, putting distance between herself and the coastline. While somewhere up that same coastline, air defense crews are already staring at their screens trying to figure out what just happened, and realizing that the clock is running out faster than they expected. Now the story splits in two. On one side, 8 small missiles skimming low over open water, spreading apart like fingers opening in darkness, each one heading toward a slightly different piece of sky. On the other side, an entire Iranian air defense network waking up all at once, trying to answer one very simple question in real time. What is coming? How many are there? And where exactly is it going to land? A little before dawn, an operator at a long-range early warning radar station notices something strange. A section of sky that has been quiet all week suddenly fills with faint, smudged returns, drifting slowly in the wrong direction. It does not look like normal air traffic. It does not look like weather either, because the patterns are too deliberate, too steady. Within a minute, the alert goes out. Across the network, something is inbound, and it is not alone. This particular radar system works by bouncing signals off the upper atmosphere, letting it see much farther than a normal radar ever could, sometimes hundreds of miles beyond the horizon, where the curve of the Earth usually hides everything. But there is a catch that never gets talked about enough. What it sees is not sharp. It is a rough smear, a general direction, and a rough estimate of distance, more like hearing distant thunder than seeing an actual storm. It tells the operators, but there is a catch that never gets talked about enough. What it sees is not sharp. It is a rough smear, a general direction, and a rough estimate of distance, more like hearing distant thunder than seeing an actual storm. It tells the operators that something is coming, and roughly which direction to worry about. It cannot tell any single battery exactly where to aim, how fast it is moving, or whether it is a plane, a bird, or a weapon built for this exact moment. That job belongs to shorter-range radar systems positioned much closer to the coast, the ones that actually guide the interceptors. And here is the real problem hiding underneath all of it. The missiles heading toward Iran are flying so low, sometimes barely above rooftop height, that most ground radar simply cannot see them until they are almost directly overhead. The curve of the Earth itself is working against every battery on that coastline. You can have the most advanced radar system money can buy, and it still will not help if the target is hiding below your own horizon. Down near ground level, the missiles are doing exactly what they were built to do. Trading speed for invisibility, hugging the terrain, slipping under high voltage lines and over irrigation canals, using the landscape itself as cover. A farmer somewhere along the route might feel the ground shiver seconds before he even hears the engines pass. By the time he looks up, whatever flew over him is already gone, swallowed by the tree line ahead, leaving nothing behind but a faint vibration in the soil. One by one, Iranian air defense batteries along the coast try to get a shot in. Their long-range radar systems climb to full power, locking onto the inbound tracks the moment they cross into view. Interceptor missiles launch, streaking upward on trails of fire, racing to close the gap before their target slips back below the horizon again. But here is the part most people never think about. Even the most advanced interceptor is only as good as the radar guiding it, and that guiding beam has to stay locked onto the target from the moment of launch until the moment of impact. If the beam loses the target for even a second or two, the interceptor essentially goes blind, guided by nothing but momentum and hope. against a target flying low and fast, weaving along the terrain like a shadow, that lock is incredibly hard to hold. The intercept has to happen inside a window that might only last a few seconds from start to finish. That is exactly what happens at the first battery to try. Interceptors launch, streak toward the incoming missile, and detonate close. Close enough to rattle windows for miles, close enough to make everyone on the coast feel safe for one false second, but not close enough to actually stop anything. The target flies straight through the falling debris and keeps going with its mission intact. It is not bad shooting, it is the geometries of the problem itself. A radar mounted only a few dozen feet off the ground, aiming at a target flying almost as low, can only see that target for a brief handful of seconds before the curve of the planet gets in the way again. You could have the best trained crew in the country manning that battery, and it still would not be enough to beat a target that never rises high enough to be seen for long. By now, more of the incoming tracks are already past this stretch of coastline, and the country's defenders are staring down at a very different kind of problem. Not one missile to track, but several spread out across completely different headings like lines in a drawing that only makes sense when you look at the whole page, each one visible to a different radar for only a short window before disappearing again. Every handoff between radar stations takes precious seconds, and every second lost is a second the network never gets back. There is a commander somewhere in a control room right now, watching separate blips flicker in and out of view on different screens, trying to stitch together one clear picture, out of a dozen broken fragments and running out of time to do it while the clock keeps moving. Quick pause. If you have made it this far, drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from tonight. It takes 10 seconds, and it pushes this video past the noise so more people can see how a moment like this actually plays out, piece by piece, second by second. Your comment is not just noise. It is a signal to the system that this matters. Somewhere in that same control room, someone makes a different kind of decision. Instead of trying to track every individual missile with precision they do not have, the order goes out to jam the sky itself. Powerful transmitters across the region light up all at once, flooding the airwaves with noise specifically aimed at scrambling satellite navigation signals across the entire province. It is a blunt tool, but it does not need to be precise to work. A satellite signal has to travel over 10,000 miles to reach a receiver on the ground, and by the time it arrives, it is incredibly faint, like a whisper in a room that has suddenly become very loud. It does not take much noise broadcast from somewhere much closer to completely drown it out. Imagine trying to hear someone whispering from across a stadium while the entire crowd suddenly starts shouting at once. The whisper is not stopped. It just stopped mattering. There is a real cost to this move, though, one that the people in that room are probably too focused to fully appreciate. Jamming that signal does not just blind incoming missiles, it also knocks out navigation for every civilian aircraft flying anywhere near that airspace, forcing air traffic controllers back onto old paper systems just to keep planes from running into each other. The country is effectively blinding a piece of its own infrastructure just to try and save one construction site, and that is a choice that reveals how desperate the moment has become. And here's the twist that changes everything. Nobody in that control room realizes yet that the missiles heading toward them were never relying purely on satellite navigation in the first place. Deep inside, each one sits a self-contained guidance system. Essentially, an incredibly precise internal compass and motion sensor constantly tracking every turn, climb, and dip since the moment of launch. It does not need a signal from space to know roughly where it is, because it remembers every movement it has made. Left completely alone for long enough, that kind of system will slowly drift off course, maybe by a mile or so after an hour of flight. That is far too imprecise for a target this small, for a site this important. So, every so often, the missile quietly checks its position against the ground itself, comparing the terrain passing beneath it to a detailed map loaded before it ever left the ship, and snapping its course back into perfect alignment. No satellite required, no signal to jam, which means 20 minutes into the loudest, most aggressive jamming effort this province has attempted in years, the incoming tracks have not drifted off course by even a fraction of a degree. An entire electronic warfare response built and funded at enormous cost is being thrown at missiles that stopped needing that signal. Before the jamming even started, look at the screen for a second. If this breakdown, minute by minute, moment by moment, is the kind of content that makes you think about how power really works in an age of speed and silence, make sure you are subscribed and tap that notification bell too, so you do not miss the next one when it drops. Meanwhile, on the ground near the target itself, an ordinary morning is unfolding, with no idea what is about to interrupt it. Workers board buses at the start of their shift, heading toward the construction site like they do every single day, talking about families, about the heat of the coming day, about nothing more urgent than a normal commute. Nobody has told them anything because at this stage, nobody outside a very small circle knows anything is happening at all. The gap between normal life and sudden crisis is sometimes only a few minutes, and in this case, the gap is closing faster than anyone on the ground can understand. Back over the water, the ship that launched this strike is still tracking every missile in real time, watching a steady stream of data arrive every few seconds. Position, fuel remaining, speed, altitude. And here is something most people do not realize about weapons like this, something that changes how we understand modern conflict. They are not fired and forgotten. Right up until the final moments, a controller sitting at a screen thousands of miles away can send an updated instruction, shifting the exact point of impact, adjusting the timing, even pulling a missile off its target entirely if the situation on the ground changes. The missile itself does not decide anything in the final second. It simply carries out whatever final order it receives, right up until the very last mile. That capability matters more than it might seem, because it means that power is not just about firepower, it is about control. If word arrived that civilians were unexpectedly near the target, any one of these weapons could be redirected or aborted within minutes of impact. It is an enormous amount of restraint built directly into the weapon system itself, hiding behind all that fire and speed. A reminder that technology can be both devastating and precise at the same time. In this case, the buses carrying workers toward the site are still minutes away when the missiles are only moments out. The timing is close enough that there is almost no room left to spare. And every second of that gap matters enormously to the people making these decisions in real time, because they are holding the balance between destruction and mercy with a button. As the final stretch begins, several of the incoming tracks start converging toward roughly the same target area, but from completely different directions. This is not an accident. It is the entire point of the plan, the heart of the design. On a screen back on the ship, one Iranian battery lights up as a real active threat. Its radar is clearly transmitting and updating its position. With every sweep, a blinking red signal of danger. Another battery nearby shows outdated information, days old, effectively invisible for planning purposes. The battery that already fired and missed is no longer the danger. It is the one that has not fired yet that matters now. That battery's crew has heard everything happening elsewhere along the coast tonight. They know at least one attempt already failed. But they also have something the earlier battery did not have as much of. Time to prepare, and a slightly better vantage point to work with, as the missiles heading their way. Cross into range, this crew fires too, sending an interceptor screaming upward on a tail of fire toward the incoming tracks. For a few seconds, it looks like it might actually work. The interceptor closes fast, guided every step of the way by a radar system holding its beam steady on the target. And for a moment, hope rises that the defense has found its answer. But the same fundamental problem shows up again in a new form. Down near ground level, the target and the terrain behind it can start to blend together on radar, making it hard for the interceptor's proximity sensor to tell the difference between a genuine hit and simply flying near the ground. The detonation happens a fraction of a second too early, a little too high. Fragments spray outward in all directions, and one of the incoming missiles takes a glancing hit along its wing, damaged but not destroyed. It shudders, corrects itself as best it can with bent surfaces and altered flight dynamics, and keeps flying toward its target with the damage worn like a scar. Slower to respond than before, but still very much in the fight. That crew reloads for a second shot, but by the time they are ready, incoming tracks have already crossed out of their engagement window entirely, moving past the range where their radar can guide another attempt. 7 missiles fly on completely untouched. One flies on, wounded but still fully functional, still carrying its purpose toward the site. And that is the moment the entire strategy behind this operation becomes clear. If you step back and look at the whole picture at once, these missiles were not launched all at the same time by accident, and they were not sent along different routes just for variety or to spread risk randomly. Every single path was calculated backward from one shared arrival moment, timed down to the second, so that missiles taking longer routes launched earlier and missiles taking shorter routes launched later, all converging on the same target area within just a few seconds of each other, but arriving from completely different directions. Think about what that actually means for the people trying to stop it. A radar system can only really focus on one direction at a time. Building a clear picture of a new target from scratch takes precious seconds every single time. When 4 separate threats appear from 4 completely different bearings, within the same few seconds, one defensive system simply cannot engage all of them properly. It can turn toward one direction and try to fight, but that means turning its back on everything else happening at the same moment. There is no reload fast enough, no crew skilled enough to turn a single direction defense into a full circle of protection in the time available, because physics and geometry do not forgive confusion. It is not really a fair fight at that point. It is a structural problem baked into the geometry of the attack itself. And there is no clever tactic on the ground that fully solves it once the missiles are already this close. Because the design of the strike is not just about speed, it is about overwhelming the very ability to see clearly, forcing the defenders into a series of impossible choices where every answer is wrong. To understand the full weight of this moment, imagine standing at the site just 1 hour earlier. You would see workers in hard hats, cranes moving slowly, concrete trucks pulling in. The ordinary rhythm of a project someone believed could not be stopped by anything short of a full invasion. That belief was the real target tonight. It was not just concrete and steel that was destroyed. It was the confidence that money alone could build immunity from a strike that never needed to announce itself. In the final stretch, the target itself comes into view for each missile's onboard camera. This particular site is not a deeply buried underground bunker that would require a massive penetrator to destroy. It is an active construction zone. Cranes standing over freshly poured concrete foundations, storage yards stacked with steel and building materials, scaffolding climbing toward unfinished structures. Exactly the kind of above-ground infrastructure that a smaller, more precise strike is perfectly suited to destroy, because it hits the work itself rather than just one hidden room. A single massive bomb dropped from an aircraft would only really be useful against one deeply buried target, and even then it might not fully destroy what lies beneath. Against a construction site spread across a wide area, several smaller, precisely placed warheads do far more damage to the overall project, wrecking equipment, halting the work schedule, destroying the equipment needed to continue, and setting the entire effort back by months or years, not just cratering one patch of ground. Each missile carries enough explosive force to flatten equipment and structures within a wide radius of impact, and each one lands within just a few feet of its intended aim point. That kind of precision is the entire reason a handful of relatively small warheads can accomplish what people often assume would take something far larger and more destructive. In the final seconds before impact, something quietly remarkable happens inside each missile. Rather than trusting its internal navigation completely, it takes one last photograph of the ground directly below and compares it against a stored reference image loaded before launch. If the picture does not line up perfectly, the guidance system calculates exactly how far off it is and corrects its course in real time with no outside signal involved at all. It is essentially double-checking its own homework in the last possible moment before it matters most, a final act of discipline that separates a near miss from a true strike. Not every correction goes perfectly, though. The missile damaged earlier by that near-miss interceptor tries to make one of these final adjustments, but its wounded control surface cannot respond quickly enough. What should have been a small last-second correction turns into a much larger miss than intended, and the warhead lands slightly off-center from its original aim. It is a reminder that even a mostly successful strike carries small failures inside it, imperfections that rarely make it into the official summary afterward, but that are very real all the same. The site still takes heavy damage, but not everywhere was reached with perfect accuracy. Back on the ship, the final burst of data arrives from each missile almost simultaneously. Position updates stop. The links go quiet. A construction site that took years to build, and that Iran's most advanced air defense systems were specifically positioned to protect, is gone in less than a minute. Hit from 4 directions at once by weapons that were already too low, too fast, and too well planned to stop. Every single battery along that coastline did roughly what it was designed to do. Radar operators reacted quickly. Interceptors launched on time. Crews followed procedures that had been trained into them for years. They did not fail out of laziness or fear. They failed because the structure of the attack was designed specifically to defeat exactly this kind of defense from the very beginning, turning every strength into a temporary weakness, every radar sweep into a brief glimpse, and every intercept into a gamble against shadow. That is the part that should genuinely worry anyone paying close attention. This was not a lucky night. It was not an accident of weather or a mistake by a tired crew. It was a plan executed almost exactly as designed against defenses that had every reasonable chance to succeed and came up short anyway, not because of failure, but because of a deeper truth, that understanding the terrain, the limitations of sight, and the speed of decision is often more powerful than the weapons themselves. Turn on your notifications if you have not already. Hit subscribe if this made you think differently about borders, speed, and the hidden weapons lurking in the dark. And tell me in the comments what you believe comes next, because the silence after a strike this precise is usually louder than the explosions. And that raises the much bigger question hanging over everything you just watched. If a single relatively small strike like this can slip through one of the most heavily defended stretches of coastline in the entire region, what does that actually tell us about the balance of power sitting quietly beneath the surface of this conflict? It tells us that distance is no longer the kind of protection it used to be. It tells us that billions of dollars spent on air defense can still leave gaps if the attacker understands exactly where those gaps are and builds a plan specifically to walk through them. And it tells us that the next move, whenever it comes from either side, is going to be shaped directly by everything that happened in these few minutes tonight. Nothing about this is really over. It is the opening move, and something much longer is already beginning. The next chapter is very likely already being planned right now, somewhere far from any camera that will ever capture it, in rooms where silence is the only language that matters. The question worth sitting with is not whether something like this can happen again. It is whether anyone who builds walls of steel and radar is truly ready for the moment when the attack does not come from above, but from everywhere at once. This is not just about Iran. It is about a new kind of war, where the biggest weapon is not size, but timing, not noise, but silence, and not force, but the precise moment when force becomes unstoppable. If you want to understand what that means for the future of conflict, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe if you are ready to think deeper about the invisible battles shaping our world, and leave a comment telling me what strikes you most about how quickly a plan can outrun a defense that thought it had time.